Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Daily Objective. A lot to talk about today. We're going to be discussing men going their own way, or MGTOW for short. I am Rucka, and as always, we have a man who's been called the last of the Greeks, or the first of their return, Nikos Soterakopoulos.
Very close enough today. So I'm very excited to discuss this topic because I think it touches upon almost every important issue that is out there in the world today. So for people who don't know, MGTOW, men going their own way, is, let's say, a subgroup of what people would call the manosphere, which is men forming networks online on how to navigate, let's say, the modern world. And it has been characterized as misogynistic or as an anti-feminist movement. According to others, it is a reaction to feminism and the reaction to the supposed gynocentric society of today. So feminists claim we live in a patriarchy. MGTOW claims we live in a gynocentric social order. And mostly it says that it's sensible to refrain from being in a committed relationship with women. And there are various levels, from the level which says not even a social interaction to a level that says you can have casual sex, but nothing beyond that. And the reason I find it very interesting is that it tells us a lot about the culture wars of today, that every aspect of life is now politicized, but also that politics are in a way depoliticized and have been brought down to this level of the culture war. So a lot of things to discuss and a lot of things to analyze. But on a starting point, what's your overall evaluation of the movement of men going their own way?
I don't like it. I mean, I don't agree with it. It's like many movements, some of their grievances are probably very valid, but their solution is not comprehensive enough. You know, anytime an intellectual movement starts with either politics or even social issues, they're ceding to the mainstream. They're ceding to the professors, whether it's the postmoderns, the moderns, the biological determinists. They are ceding to the academics a monopoly on the fundamentals, such as, what is the nature of a person? What's the proper epistemology? How do you know anything? What's the proper ethics? These fundamentals they're just soaking it up from the mainstream, just like the feminists that they despise so much, and just like everybody who they feel is their enemy. They are just soaking up what the culture is sending to them from the universities. So unless you're going to be radical in asking these fundamental questions, and Ayn Rand is radical, of course, she addresses these fundamentals. Unless you're willing to go that deep, you're not actually going to solve any of the problems that ail you. That's what I tell people in every various group and every various movement that I see. Unless you're willing to be radical and get down to the fundamentals, you're not actually going to get what it is you say you want.
So I think MGTOW goes down to the fundamentals. I mean, as long as we can see that this movement has some people as, let's say, their intellectual leaders. And I will mention the one thing that I think MGTOW could be beneficial to some people, taken with a lot of pinch of salt, but also why ultimately I think it's going nowhere, and actually it can be a negative force, and not only for the usual reason. So the usual reason is that many MGTOWs are misogynist and all that stuff. So that's not the point here. This might very well be the truth, but here we're making, let's say, an ideological / philosophical examination of the movements. Now, as we did with woke culture, we didn't say, oh, the cancel people, they're bad people. We try to see what is wrong with their ideas. So I think the attractive element that MGTOW has, because you need to see why does a movement attract people. The attractive element, I wouldn't even say it's their critique of feminism, because you can find many better critiques of feminism. It's this element of self-development. It's this element of, as they say, chase excellence, don't chase women. So as opposed to a lot of strands of feminism who kind of see women as a collective and also go for more like political solutions, which in a way take away the agency from individual women. Again, I'm not referring to all waves of feminism, I'm referring to some particular strands of feminism. So for example, I wouldn't include Camille Paglia on that. So equally, not equally, the opposite is the case with MGTOW. So they say, no, we want every individual man to thrive in their life, to take life in their own hands. And in this way, you could say that this is something positive. But here's the problem. When you say chase excellence, don't chase women, it kind of creates this dichotomy with these values, that romantic love cannot be part of this kind of basket, let's say, of values. So I would switch this and I would say, chase values and make sure you measure what is the hierarchy of these values. So for example, should you date this ex-woman one, for example, you have the biggest project of your life. Then you make the measure and you say, no, this is more important for me, my career, or this project is more important for me. But it could also mean the opposite, that I've achieved things in my life. I found this person that in a way kind of mirrors these values. And for this period of my life or whatever, this romantic kind of endeavor is more important than chasing other things. I can already hear the reactions that Nikos and Rucka are blue pill betas and all that stuff. But what's your take on this idea that chasing excellent not women is not necessarily there shouldn't be necessarily a contradiction here?
Look, with any movement, there's bound to be some overlap. So, I agree with the feminists that women should not be persecuted. And I agree with the MGTOWs to the extent that they're saying that every man should work on himself and improve himself rather than putting his self-esteem in the hands of a woman. First comes self-development and the pursuit of the good life. And then, the right girl or the right person that you're attracted to will show up in your life. So, I think it sounds like you're focusing on maybe where there's some overlap and what we might like about some of the messaging coming out of MGTOW. But you don't need MGTOW for self-improvement. There's dating coaches that give you the same message. There's just self-help books and coaches that would say, don't make the opposite sex or don't make a romantic partner your sole source of self-esteem or quality of life. But I look at MGTOW as a lot of them are raising valid concerns, such as maybe that there's disproportionate treatment by the courts in custody battles, for instance. And I don't know whether or not that's true, but let's say it is. Let's say that a woman accusing a man of rape is believed more than not. Again, I'm just saying, let's say that's true. What is the solution? The solution is we need objective rule of law. We need laws on the books that are derived from an objective standard that are catered to protect the rights of the individual. So we need to abolish the lobby system. We need to abolish cronyism in all of its forms. And of course, getting there will require us to address the fundamentals of philosophy, metaphysics, and epistemology, and ethics. So yeah, there's some things that MGTOW are right to be upset about, but the way they're going to get there, the way the route they're taking is not actually going to get them what they seem to say they want.
Yeah, and just to clarify, this is not areas where I consider there's overlap, because I think it's a misunderstanding to say, objectivism and MGTOW, it's basically overlap, but there's these differences. What I'm trying to see is why this movement has appeal. And if you spend some time online, you realize it has appeal. And I think something could be that there are many men out there who are looking for some kind of guidance. I think we discussed this on the Jordan Peterson show, and when we discussed Peterson, and on the show where we discussed Rucka. So, and I like what you say, that first you chase values, and then let's say romantic love is almost a reward for that. Because if you take it the other way around, I think you're bound for heartbreak. Now, here's the number one issue I have with, philosophical issue I have with MGTOW, or generally with the manosphere or the so-called red pill, which is a metaphor from the film Matrix, which is being appropriated by various different movements, but from the manosphere, it kind of seeing the world for what it is. My problem is the biological determinism that is inherent in this movement. And you hear a lot of people who consider themselves part of the wider red pill or MGTOW movement. And they will quote every now and then Ayn Rand. They will say, for example, that, yeah, that's kind of inspirational. I mean, one of the most, probably the most influential figure in the so-called manosphere is Rollo Tomassi, and his books are called The Rational Male. Or if you go to the reading list of many of these forums, you will see The Fountainhead or Atlas Shrugged. But here's the problem. At the very end of the day, there's a very biological, deterministic outlook in this movement. And they're open about this. I think Rollo Tomassi the other day had, let's say, a photo on Twitter where he had someone standing, the gold medal being something like genes or something like that, silver medal being nurture, and the bronze medal being free will. So they're open that there are these forces inside us that kind of guide us. And here's the irony. This movement, which is supposed to be very, very radical, has the same level of determinism, although of a different kind, with the determinism of the status quo. So what does the status quo tell you? It tells you that who you are, the group that you're part to, not only influences, but almost determines who you are, right? So you think like this because you're white or you're Jew or you're Christian or you're black or cisgender or whatever. And basically you have the manosphere telling you that these powers of evolutionary psychology are so powerful that they shape social phenomena. Now, I have some criticism on that, and I will also say why I think there is some kernel of truth to that, but not in a deterministic way. But what's your overall take on this issue of this movement saying, look, as opposed to feminists, we use actual science, and our actual science is evolutionary psychology?
Well, I've long said that, unfortunately, the opposition to the postmodernists has been biological determinism. We've seen this, unfortunately. I mean, this has been an ongoing struggle in philosophy and in psychology and in all these different schools because they don't have a good epistemology, such as the one that Ayn Rand provides. If you read Ayn Rand's book, Introduction to Objectivist Epistemology, she points out that there are the mystics in the university as well as the neo-mystics who sort of conflate biological determinism as though it's rational science-based epistemology, as though people are rats. And I'm doing my best to kind of paraphrase, but obviously go read the book if you haven't, anyone watching this. Look, the response to the postmoderns and the subjectivists should not be another form of determinism. It should not, the battle is not nature versus nurture. And the pathetic compromise we've seen from, like groups like the so-called intellectual dark web is, well, it's somewhere in between. It's a little bit of nature and it's a little bit of nurture. I say bunk to all of them, not complete bunk. There is an element to which, of course, your upbringing and your environment influences you. And of course, your genetics are a indispensable piece of the puzzle, but philosophy is the overwhelmingly important factor. How we see history being driven. That's how we see a person's life being altered. It's the ideas that the person accepts and what they follow. And this includes an understanding of consciousness and its relationship to existence. So this is why philosophy is the important part of the puzzle that people are refusing to acknowledge. So whether it's MGTOW, whether it's the alt-right, whether it's these various different groups that have sprung up to oppose the postmodern feminists, you cannot beat one form of determinism with another form of determinism. You just become like, cousins fighting over, two sides of the coin. They are cousins and their ancestors are Kant, Hegel, and Marx. We need Aristotle and we need Ayn Rand. There's some reading material for you.
But here's what they would say, which is very interesting, because remember we had this show about libertarians and we talk about praxeology and this opposed neutrality. So Tomassi or someone else would say, look, I'm not saying this is how it should be. I'm saying if you take the averages, that's what we see. So he also used the term praxeology. So they would say, well, when I say evolutionary psychology, all I'm saying is that what tends to happen. But here's the problem. This might be the case that yes, this is what tends to happen. But the reason this tends to happen is that most people, because this is what the culture is telling us today, prefer to go to the default, let's say, option, the easy option. And that's a situation with tribalism. Tribalism is not let's say, in our genes in a way that it's kind of determining us. It's the easy option. It's the default option. And the same happened with gender tribalism. So indeed, yes, you can see that some of the tendencies that they describe, they're indeed tendencies outside, but this doesn't mean that they are biologically determined. It's just in our culture of low expectation and low horizons, yes, many men are, let's say, the way they are described. But again, as you said, the answer is, what is the positive that we suggest? And the solution is not to fight one tribe with another tribe. Now, the last issue I want to throw on the table, and we only have 3 minutes to discuss it, but I think it's fascinatingly interesting, is how these small tribes around the internet, let's say the feminists versus the manosphere and all that stuff, there's almost something political to it. So you could almost predict what are their political allegiances. So for example, the vast majority of the manosphere was fanatically pro-Trump in 2016. And the vast majority, let's say, of the feminists are predictably on the left. And a lot of people have said, could it be that politics become more and more, I don't want to use the term archetype, but almost like a lifestyle, like almost a new kind of person, a new kind of character. So being right-wing means, I go to the gym, I listen to Joe Rogan, I take my supplements, whatever. And the right sees this as an advantage because it says we offer, let's say, an example of beauty, of fulfillment. And is there something to it? Because it's not anymore about ideas, because as we've discussed, the fundamental behind their ideas is more or less the same. So could it be that now more and more right versus left will mean, what's your basically lifestyle, or what's your aesthetic kind of sense of life, or whatever?
I'm reminded of the South Park episode from the early 2000s where there was an anti-war protest happening and a pro-war demonstration happening, and the news reporter is saying, one half of these people loves country music and the other, hates country music or prefers rock and roll, whatever it was. And yeah, there is definitely a culture that springs up around these movements. And yeah, it is true that the response to the left has been an attempt at integration, at an attempt at offering values, at saying, look, you don't need to throw your values away and join these nihilistic egalitarians. You can live for something. You can love your country. You can love your family, your community, but it is a misintegration. And it's not going to lead anywhere positive, unfortunately. These MGTOWs, as much as they want to pay lip service to Ayn Rand, they do seem to look at relationships as though they're completely transactional. Now, there is something called a spiritual trade, like we're having one right now. We're having a conversation. We're spiritually trading with the audience as well. And in relationships, there is also a spiritual trade. That is a trade that is not material. But that is not the way the MGTOWs speak about how women interact with men. To them, everything is transactional. Everything is like a form of prostitution with extra steps. And that type of worldview is not going to lead you to happy relationships or even to happy solitude. And in politics, it's going to be reflected in a system that does not respect the rights of the individual. We need to fight like crazy to preserve consciousness as a concept that we're aware of, relates to reality, individualism, the individual's pursuit of happiness, pursuit of values as paramount, or else I fear that dire times are ahead. And that includes men. Men are going to lose as well as women and everybody in between.
Yeah, and don't even get me started on the political kind of expression of, so you can see quite often, for example, some MGTOWs or people in the red pill saying, oh, we need to take away rights from women. Like, A, who is we? And B, this shows that you have almost zero understanding of what rights are. So that's and
they don't, by the way, they don't come up with these are not original thinkers. They get this from the university. So for 150 plus years, you've had prominent thinkers saying that rights are a social construct, that rights are an invention, and they throw them away just as easily, which is why we live in a pragmatist dystopia borderline. It's why we live in a lobby system. So, you know, but like, I'm happy to rip on MGTOW all day, but like I said earlier, they are soaking up the ideas that come out of the university. So we need to get to the source. We need to get down to the fundamentals of philosophy, and the rest will follow.
I think this was really spot on. But looks like after the end of every show, we congratulate each other. Oh, you know, but no, seriously, today I really enjoyed that, and it gave me some ideas to see this issue from a different angle. Anyway, thank you very much from me and from Rucka. Many thanks to our audience, and we'll see you. I will see you tomorrow. Rucka is going to see you later this week. Bye, everyone.